that summer vacation you just took. Take a good long look at the photos, because it might very well be the last affordable trip you ever go on. When Spirit Airlines completely collapsed and shut its doors earlier this year, the internet laughed. People made memes about the yellow planes, the plastic seats, and the wild airport brawls. But what nobody realized while they were laughing was that they were watching a funeral. The absolute shutdown of Spirit wasn't just a standard corporate bankruptcy to be filed away in the Wall Street Journal. It was the violent death knell for the golden age of budget travel. And here's exactly why, starting right now, your next vacation has officially become an exclusive luxury item. To understand how we got here, you have to look at the massive illusion we've all been living under. For the last 30 years, roughly from 1990 to 2020, the sky was democratized. Aviation went from being a luxury reserved for the elite in suits to a mass transit system in the clouds. And for an entire generation, budget travel wasn't just a fun hobby. It was the ultimate consolation prize. Think about it. We are talking about a generation carrying the crushing weight of unprecedented housing crises, predatory student debt, and relentless compounding inflation. You might not have been able to afford a 20% down payment on a starter home. You might not have had a pension or a massive stock portfolio, but for $200 or $300 you could still fly to the other side of the world. You could still sit on a beach in Thailand, wander the streets of Barcelona, or hike through Costa Rica. You could still escape. Travel was the one piece of the American dream that was actually heavily discounted. But welcome to the brutal, unforgiving reality of 2026. That era is dead. It is buried. Travel costs have surged 20% from just last year alone, drastically outpacing standard inflation. Spirit Airlines is gone, and with it the only competitive downward pressure on ticket prices across the entire industry. I need you to understand this. The end of budget tourism is not a system glitch. It's not a temporary post-pandemic hangover. It is the direct calculated result of a global gentrification project. The financial barricades are being rapidly built higher, and the sole purpose of those walls is to push the vast majority of us right back into our place. Let's look at the mechanics of this gentrification starting at 35,000 feet. When a budget airline collapses, their fleet of airplanes does not just evaporate into thin air. They are massive multi-million-dollar assets. So what happens? They are bought up for pennies on the dollar by the legacy giants, the Deltas, the Uniteds, the Americans. They take these planes, give them a fresh coat of corporate paint, and immediately gut the interiors. Those cramped rows of budget economy seats that allowed college kids and working-class families to fly for $50, ripped out, tossed in the dumpster. And what replaces them, they are immediately swapped out for sprawling business-class suites and highly lucrative premium economy sections. This is the literal gentrification of the sky. It is a neighborhood being bulldozed to build luxury condos, but it's happening inside an aluminum tube. The major airlines are playing a very specific, highly weaponized psychological game. It is a corporate strategy known as enshittification, the process of intentional degradation. 10 years ago, you bought an economy ticket and you got a seat bag and maybe a little dignity. Today, airlines have fractured the cabin into 6 or 7 different microscopic tiers. And the foundation of this strategy is to purposely engineer the basic economy experience to be absolutely physically unbearable. They aren't just cutting costs. They are actively punishing you. They strip away your carry-on luggage. They lock the seats into a rigid, upright position so they physically cannot recline. They intentionally randomize your seating to split you up from your spouse or worse, your young children. The goal here isn't just to save an inch of legroom. The goal is psychological torture. They want to squeeze you so hard, make you feel so cheap and miserable, that even if you are on a razor-thin budget, you will grit your teeth, pull out your credit card, and pay the extra $80 for main cabin, just to retain your basic human dignity. Basic economy is a decoy. It exists to make you spend more, and the brutal mathematics behind this scarcity make it entirely permanent. We are living through the long-term fallout of Boeing's catastrophic safety crises and massive unfixable disruptions in the global engine supply chain. Airlines physically cannot acquire new airplanes fast enough to meet demand. The supply is permanently capped, so if you are a CEO operating inside a finite aluminum tube, what do? You optimize the square footage. Inside that plane, a premium economy seat takes up a bit more space, but it generates roughly 33% more revenue per square foot than a standard economy seat. Business class generates even more. Corporate greed is a perfectly tuned, emotionless machine. If supply is limited, the machine will automatically and without hesitation eliminate the budget backpacker to prioritize the wealthy traveler who doesn't look at the price tag. But the airlines are only half the story. Down on the ground, the housing and hotel markets are pulling the exact same trigger. Let's look at the massive destructive trap of the digital nomad trend. We were sold this romantic vision of working from a laptop on a beach in Bali. But the reality is a form of modern economic colonialism. The old budget backpacker paradises, places like Lisbon, Medellin, Bali, and Mexico City have been choked to death by their own popularity. When a flood of remote tech workers bring six-figure Silicon Valley salaries into developing nations, they detonate localized hyperinflation. A landlord in Mexico City realizes he doesn't need to rent his apartment to a local family for $500 a month, or to a budget backpacker for $20 a night. He can rent it to an American software engineer for $2,000 a month. This dynamic has completely wiped out the global inventory of cheap apartments and hostels that budget travelers used to rely on. And the platform that was supposed to democratize travel and save us from hotels Airbnb has entirely turned its back on the working class. Remember the original pitch, rent an air mattress in someone's spare room? It was about community and sharing costs. Today, Airbnb operates as a shadow network of unregulated stealth hotels. The company algorithmically favors and promotes superhosts who are actually multi-million-dollar corporate management firms holding dozens of high-end properties. They actively purged hundreds of thousands of their cheapest listings because they didn't generate enough fee revenue. The dream of renting a cheap shared apartment with 4 friends and splitting the cost. That dream is dead, and this betrayal has paved the way for the ruthless, unchecked rise of the mega hotel cartel. Major global hubs like New York City, Barcelona, and Amsterdam realized that Airbnbs were destroying their housing markets, so they used heavy legislation to crush the short-term rental industry. In New York, Local Law 18 effectively banned regular Airbnbs overnight. They also slapped massive tourist taxes on visitors, specifically designed to drive out low-budget travelers who don't spend enough money at local luxury restaurants. The result: total monopolistic victory for the mega hotel chains. With Airbnb crippled by the government, hotels lost their only real competition. They immediately established a brutal new price floor. And because they know you have nowhere else to sleep, they are bleeding you dry with junk fees. Destination fees, urban resort fees, mandatory Wi-Fi fees, housekeeping fees. They are extracting every last available dollar from the tourists who are stubborn enough to still show up. Then there is the silent killer that nobody is talking about on travel blogs. The stealth green taxes and the devastating macro cost shocks. First, let's talk about the raw energy required to move a metal tube through the sky. Geopolitical conflicts and fractured supply chains have fundamentally altered the price of crude oil, essentially doubling the cost of jet fuel over the long term. Now let's do the math on this financial asymmetry, because this is where the budget model dies. If oil spikes and the airline has to add $500 in fuel surcharges to a $10,000 international first-class ticket, the wealthy corporate buyer doesn't even blink. It's a rounding error on the company expense account. But when that exact same fuel spike forces an airline to add $100 to a $70 budget ticket, it is a fatal blow. The margin on a cheap ticket is practically non-existent, often less than $5 of pure profit per seat. High oil prices instantly wipe out the razor-thin margins of budget airlines, making cheap flights mathematically impossible to sustain. But it gets worse. On top of standard fuel costs, governments around the world, particularly in Europe and North America, are aggressively pressuring the aviation industry to transition to sustainable aviation fuel, commonly known as SAF. SAF is made from renewable sources like cooking oil or agricultural waste. It is a fantastic concept for the environment. There is just one massive problem. It currently costs anywhere from 3 to 5 times more than traditional Jet A fuel. And make no mistake, the airlines are absolutely not absorbing that financial risk into their profit margins. They are doing what corporations always do. They are passing it on. They are pushing 100% of this new massive green tax directly into the base fare of the tickets. And who feels it the most? The budget traveler. The working class family saving up for a year to fly to Florida is being forced to pay aggressively higher fares to silently fund the greening of the sky, all while the billionaires continue to fly private jets overhead. The cost of environmental sustainability is being entirely subsidized by the people at the bottom of the economy. What we are ultimately looking at is a K-shaped financial reality. It is a story of total unbridgeable polarization. The upper class is traveling more frequently and far more luxuriously than at any point in human history. Why? Because they are fueled by the wealth effect. Their massive stock portfolios, their index funds, and their real estate assets are vastly outperforming inflation. If your house appreciated by $100,000 on paper last year, dropping $15,000 on a luxury trip to the Amalfi Coast feels like absolutely nothing. You feel invincible. They have the capital, and the travel industry is contorting itself to serve only them. But the younger generation, Gen Z and millennials, are facing a horrifyingly different reality. Trapped by stagnant wages that haven't kept pace with real inflation and battered by relentless price hikes on basic necessities like rent and groceries, they are refusing to give up the cultural expectation of travel. Instead, they are financing their vacations entirely through debt. We are seeing a terrifying explosion in the use of buy now, pay later applications like Klarna and Affirm just to purchase basic airline tickets. People are taking out 24% APR microloans to spend 4 days in Miami. The basic enriching human desire to go out and see the world has been twisted by the financial sector into a predatory high-interest consumer debt trap. You aren't buying a vacation. You are buying a financial anchor that will drag you down for the next 3 years. And here is the hardest, most uncomfortable truth for an American audience to swallow: the world no longer needs you. The dominant, unshakable strength of the US dollar, the very thing that made budget travel so incredibly cheap for Americans over the last decade, is fading from its decade highs. Global markets like Europe, Japan, and Southeast Asia are no longer rolling out the red carpet for Western backpackers holding crumpled $20 bills. They don't care about your budget vlog. They are entirely focused on a new demographic. Governments and tourism boards are frantically busy designing ultra-premium services, luxury infrastructure, and exclusive visa programs for the explosive new upper middle class flooding in from India, China, and the wealthy Arab states. The geopolitical power dynamic has shifted, and the American budget traveler is simply being priced out of the global market. So, where does that leave you? You have 2 choices: adapt to the new rules or stay home. Complaining about the way things used to be in 2018 will not put you on a beach. The rules of the financial game have fundamentally changed, and if you still want to see the world, you have to ruthlessly restructure your entire approach. First, travel hacking is no longer an optional nerdy hobby. It is a mandatory survival skill. Understanding how to leverage credit card sign-up bonuses, optimizing spending categories, and playing the complex game of points and airline miles. This is not just for cheapskates hunting for a tiny discount anymore. It is quite literally the only financial shield you have left to protect your purchasing power against aggressive travel inflation. The airlines have essentially created their own shadow currency. If you are paying for international flights entirely with hard cash in 2026, you are voluntarily losing the game. You have to learn how to print your own tickets using the bank's money. Second, you have to accept the total death of peak season. If you are not in the top 10% of income earners, you have to forget about summer vacations in Europe. Forget July. Forget August. Erase them from your calendar. The middle class must learn to migrate exclusively during the shoulder seasons. You have to book your flights for late March, You have to go in October or November. You have to shift your entire timeline to avoid getting financially slaughtered by the ultra-rich, who have monopolized the peak travel windows. The weather might be 10 degrees cooler. 10. But the prices will be 50% cheaper, and the crowds will be gone. Finally, you must embrace the rise of microtourism. It is time to shrink your geographical radius. The era of taking 3 intercontinental debt-funded flights a year is over. Trade the massive, stressful international trips for highly gear-rated domestic road trips. Invest in a state park pass. Go camping. More importantly, start hunting down the overlooked Tier 2 cities. Stop going to Paris, go to Krakow. Stop going to the Amalfi Coast. Look at Albania. Find the domestic satellite cities that haven't been entirely infected by the luxury hotel cartels and the digital nomad inflation yet. You have to become a value investor, but for geography. Find the incredible value where the desperate crowds aren't looking. Listen to me closely. The travel industry is not broken. It hasn't lost its way. It is operating exactly precisely the way it was designed to operate under maximum capitalist pressure. What we are witnessing is not an anomaly. It is a reversion to the mean. Global tourism is reverting back to its true nature, snapping back to the reality of the 1920s and 1930s. It is once again becoming an exclusive, highly guarded luxury privilege reserved only for the elite few. The world isn't getting any smaller. The financial system is just building the walls higher, increasing the toll on the road to keep the vast majority of us exactly where we are. If you want to survive this shift, if you want to understand the real mechanics of money, see completely through the corporate financial illusions, and learn how to actually build leverage in a system explicitly designed to keep you broke and geographically trapped. Hit that subscribe button. Welcome to FinDocs. Let's get to work.